Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
It started one afternoon in London. It was cold and rainy. Mrs. Wilkins was at her women's club. She came from Hampstead to shop and have lunch. After lunch, she picked up a newspaper called The Times. She looked at the page with small notices. One notice said, "To those who love flowers and sunshine, a small old Italian castle by the sea is for rent in April. It has all the servants you need. Write to Box 1000, The Times." Mrs. Wilkins saw the notice. She liked flowers and sunshine. But she was poor and thought such places were only for rich people. She had saved £90 over many years from her clothes money. Her husband, Mr. Wilkins, told her to save money for a rainy day. Mr. Wilkins worked as a lawyer. He liked saving money, but not when it made the food bad. He was happy when Mrs. Wilkins wore cheap clothes and did not spend too much. Mrs. Wilkins looked out of the window at the wet street. The rain was falling, and many people with umbrellas hurried past. She thought about the sunshine in Italy. She wondered if this was the rainy day her husband talked about. Maybe she could use some of her money to go to the castle in April. She thought old castles might be cheap because they have problems. Then, she laughed at the idea. It was silly to think she could go. She went to get her coat and umbrella. She wanted to catch a crowded bus and go to buy fish for dinner. Her husband only liked one kind of fish, soles. As she walked, she saw another woman in the club, Mrs. Arbuthnot. Mrs. Wilkins knew her by face. They both lived in Hampstead but never spoke. Mrs. Arbuthnot helped poor people through the church. Mrs. Wilkins and her husband went to different parties with artists. She did not like these parties because she never knew what to say about the paintings. People never noticed her. Her husband, Mr. Wilkins, was handsome and clever. People liked him. He gave good advice about art. At parties, Mrs. Wilkins stayed quiet. She felt small and shy. No one listened to her. She often saw Mrs. Arbuthnot at church but never talked to her. Every Sunday, Mrs. Wilkins saw Mrs. Arbuthnot in church. Mrs. Arbuthnot helped the poor children there. She brought them into the church before the choir came in. She made the children sit nicely in their seats and kneel to pray. Then they stood up again when the choir and the priests arrived. Mrs. Arbuthnot always looked sad, but she was good at her work. Mrs. Wilkins often thought about this. Her husband, Mr. Wilkins, always told her that if people did their work well, they would be happy. But Mrs. Arbuthnot did her work well and still looked unhappy. That afternoon in the club, Mrs. Wilkins saw Mrs. Arbuthnot sitting at a table, looking at a newspaper. She was staring at one place on the page and did not move. She looked like she was dreaming. Mrs. Wilkins felt something inside her. Even though she was shy, she walked to the table and sat down in front of Mrs. Arbuthnot. They had never spoken before, Mrs. Arbuthnot didn't look up. She kept looking at the paper. Mrs. Wilkins waited, trying to be brave enough to talk. She wanted to ask about the advertisement for the Italian castle. She didn't know why, but she felt she must ask. Mrs. Arbuthnot looked so kind and sad. Mrs. Wilkins thought, why can't two sad people talk to each other? Maybe we could share our thoughts and dreams, just for a little while. Mrs. Wilkins believed Mrs. Arbuthnot was reading about the same castle, thinking about flowers, sunshine, the sea, and warmth, instead of the cold rain outside and the boring days in London. Suddenly, Mrs. Wilkins spoke. "Are you reading about the castle with the wisteria?" she asked. Mrs. Arbuthnot was surprised, but Mrs. Wilkins was even more surprised at herself for speaking. Mrs. Arbuthnot looked at Mrs. Wilkins for a moment. She had never noticed her before. She had read about the castle a little earlier and was lost in a dream about sunshine and the sea. "Why do you ask me that?" Mrs. Arbuthnot said softly. Mrs. Wilkins blushed. "Oh, I saw it too, and I thought maybe," she said shyly. Then she added, "I see you in church every Sunday." "In church?" Mrs. Arbuthnot asked. "Yes. And this advertisement, it seems so wonderful. And today is so sad and rainy." Mrs. Arbuthnot looked kindly at her. "If you see me in church, you live in Hampstead too?" "Oh yes," said Mrs. Wilkins, her head lowering a little. "Oh yes." "Where do you live in Hampstead?" asked Mrs. Arbuthnot. She always liked to know the facts before giving advice. But Mrs. Wilkins did not answer. She softly put her hand on the part of the newspaper where the advertisement was. It was like the words were very special to her. "Maybe that's why this place sounds so wonderful," she said. "No, I think it's wonderful anyway," said Mrs. Arbuthnot, sighing a little. "So you were reading it too?" asked Mrs. Wilkins. "Yes," said Mrs. Arbuthnot, her eyes dreamy again. "Wouldn't it be wonderful to go there?" whispered Mrs. Wilkins. "Yes, wonderful," said Mrs. Arbuthnot. But then her face became calm and sad again. "But it's no use thinking about such things," she said. "Oh, but it is," said Mrs. Wilkins quickly, surprising even herself. She looked shy in her simple coat and hat, her hair untidy. "Just thinking about it makes one feel better. And sometimes, if you think about something a lot, it really happens." Mrs. Arbuthnot looked at her carefully. She wasn't sure what kind of person Mrs. Wilkins was. "Maybe," she said kindly, leaning forward, "you will tell me your name. If we are going to be friends, we should start properly." "Oh yes, thank you. I'm Mrs. Wilkins," she said, blushing. "I don't think it means anything to you. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like it means anything to me. But I am Mrs. Wilkins." She didn't like her name. She thought it was a small, silly name. Her husband, Mr. Wilkins, wanted her to say Mrs. Mellish Wilkins at important times, but she only did that when he was nearby. She thought Mellish made it sound even worse. When he first told her to use it, she had said no. Then, after a long pause, Mr. Wilkins had said coldly, "But I am not a villa," because she had compared it to a house name on a gate. They had a long, silent argument after that. She thought anyone would argue if they stayed together every day for 2 years. "We need a holiday. My husband is a solicitor," she told Mrs. Arbuthnot. "And he's very handsome." "Well," said Mrs. Arbuthnot kindly, "that must be nice for you." "Why?" asked Mrs. Wilkins. Mrs. Arbuthnot was surprised but started to explain. Yet Mrs. Wilkins was not listening. She was seeing a picture in her mind. She and Mrs. Arbuthnot sitting together under a beautiful wisteria in the sunshine at the old castle. She could see it. They were there. Mrs. Wilkins stared at Mrs. Arbuthnot, her face bright with excitement. Mrs. Arbuthnot noticed it and stared too, surprised by the light in Mrs. Wilkins's face. The two women looked at each other. Mrs. Arbuthnot was surprised. Mrs. Wilkins had the face of someone who had just had a big idea. Of course, that was how it could happen. Mrs. Wilkins couldn't go to Italy alone. She didn't have enough money, and she wouldn't want to go by herself. But if she and Mrs. Arbuthnot went together, she leaned across the table. "Why don't we try to get it?" she whispered. Mrs. Arbuthnot opened her eyes wide. "Get it?" she repeated. "Yes," said Mrs. Wilkins quietly, as if someone might hear them. "Not just sit here and say how wonderful, then go back to Hampstead and cook dinner like always. We've done this for years and we'll keep doing it for years. Unless," she added, blushing, "we take a break. Everyone needs a holiday sometimes. It would be good for us. We would come back happier and nicer to everyone." "But how do you mean, get it?" asked Mrs. Arbuthnot. "Take it," said Mrs. Wilkins. "Take it." "Yes. Rent it. You and I share it. Then it would cost only half. And you look like you need a holiday too." "But we don't know each other," said Mrs. Arbuthnot. "Well, we would if we went away for a month. I've saved some money for a rainy day, and maybe you have too. And this," she said, looking out the window at the gray sky, "this is the rainy day." Mrs. Arbuthnot thought, "She is a little strange." But she also felt something inside her move. Imagine a whole month away from everything to a beautiful place, said Mrs. Wilkins. Mrs. Arbuthnot thought she shouldn't talk like that. The vicar wouldn't like it. But still, it sounded wonderful. Then habit pulled her back. "But heaven isn't a place far away," she said kindly. "It's here and now, inside us. We are told that." Mrs. Wilkins shook her head. "It isn't," she said. Mrs. Arbuthnot was surprised, and though she tried to explain, she too sometimes had doubts. She looked at Mrs. Wilkins. The idea of a holiday was starting to wake something inside her too. For Mrs. Arbuthnot, for things were very important. God, husband, home, and duty. These had been her guide for years. After much sadness in her life, she held on to these things like a pillow and was afraid of changing. So now, as she listened to Mrs. Wilkins, she felt uneasy. She wanted to give her a label to help calm herself. Maybe she has nerves, thought Mrs. Arbuthnot. Maybe she's too emotional. She looked kindly at Mrs. Wilkins's small, eager face and thin shoulders. She couldn't see her long legs under the table. Mrs. Wilkins had a face like a little girl, hoping for something wonderful. But nice things don't really make people happy, thought Mrs. Arbuthnot. I've learned this from my own life. She had married Frederick when she was 20 and was now 33. She had once loved him very much, but now he was just another duty in her life. Real happiness, she believed, came from helping others and from God. She didn't want to start dreaming again. She didn't want to remember beautiful things or to wish for them. So she said kindly, I would like us to be friends. Come and visit me. I'll let me visit you. I'll give you my address. She took out a card from her bag, but Mrs. Wilkins didn't take the card. Instead, she said softly, It's strange, but I can see us both this April in that beautiful castle. Mrs. Arbuthnot felt uneasy again. Do you? She asked. Don't you ever see things before they happen? Asked Mrs. Wilkins. Never, said Mrs. Arbuthnot, trying to smile, but she couldn't. Well, said Mrs. Wilkins, even if it's wrong, it would only be for 1 month. Mrs. Arbuthnot tried to say it was wrong, but Mrs. Wilkins spoke again. I think it's wrong to be good for too long until you feel sad. I've done nothing but duties, and no one loves me more for it. I want something else. She looked like she might cry, but then quickly smiled and said, I don't know why I'm telling you this. It's the advertisement, and because we're both so miserable,